Hello everyone, welcome to the CA3 Climate Action and Advocacy on the Airwaves podcast. My name is Simon Evans and I welcome you. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the University of Calgary's Mobilizing Alberta Climate Action Grant Program. We are broadcasting on 90.9 FM CJSW in Calgary. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. I hope you enjoy your time here on the airwaves as we dive into the world of climate action.
Growing up, I was taught from an early age about the importance of preserving our environment. I can vividly remember participating in my local science fair at the age of 9, enthusiastically presenting my science fair project on the effects of climate change and the greenhouse gas effect. Playing outside was something that I loved doing as a child, and I would spend hours climbing trees and playing tag in the forest beside my house. My family would go on summer trips to the Bay of Fundy, and each time we went, I would marvel at the beautiful scenery and the vast ocean that seemed to stretch endlessly across the horizon. Now, I will take you through a short thought exercise. Think of the fondest childhood memories you have of your experiences with the natural environment. Memories of hiking in the forest, fun-filled days at the beach, or playing in the snow. Then, imagine those same places. Except now, the forests are sparse, the beaches are covered by ocean, and you are playing in the grass in the dead of winter. That is the reality that children and youth will face in the coming future. Welcome to the Climate Action and Advocacy in the Airwaves podcast. My name is Emily Babcock. I am a fourth-year Bachelor of Social Work student at the University of Calgary, and I also hold a Bachelor of Arts in Human Rights from St. Thomas University. The University of Calgary, located in the heart of southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. The University of Calgary is situated on the land northwest of where the Bow River meets the Elbow River, a site traditionally known as Mohkinstsis to the Blackfoot, Wichispaw to the Stoney Nakoda, and Goodsitsi to the Tsuut'ina. On this land and in this place, we strive to learn together, walk together, and grow together in a good way. I am from Fredericton, New Brunswick, which is the unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples, who signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s. In acknowledging and honoring the Indigenous peoples who have cared for and lived in these lands for thousands of years, I also acknowledge the privilege that I hold as a white settler living on and benefiting from stolen lands. I acknowledge my connection to these lands in the spirit of truth and reconciliation and environmental justice, as colonization has had a devastating and continuing impact on the environment and in the Indigenous peoples that have dedicated thousands of years to caring for and respecting these lands. Climate change is the unfortunate reality facing our world today. Whether it is the rising sea levels, the increase in extreme weather events, or devastating forest fires, climate change is having a profoundly negative impact on the environment. Children and youth are among the most impacted by climate change. According to a report by UNICEF in 2023, children are more likely to be impacted by the effects of climate change. Air pollution is making it hard for children to breathe. The number of children affected by disease is increasing, and children are suffering due to rising temperatures. The United Nations has outlined a plan to fight climate change and to address other threats to our environment that includes helping children and youth to be better educated on environmental issues such as climate change. In their 2024 report on climate change and its impact on children and youth, titled Pact for the Future, Global Digital Compact and Declaration on Future Generations, the United Nations states that children and youth must be provided with adequate education to ensure that they are prepared for a world that continues to be impacted by climate change. This would include teaching children and youth about environmental issues such as climate change as part of school curriculums. Having grown up in New Brunswick, I can remember climate change being taught to me in school throughout my education. Not only was I educated in grade school about climate change being a threat to the Earth's environment, but I was also taught to take action against climate change by participating in efforts to help the environment. The province of Alberta is where I live, study, and work now, and I have noticed differences in how issues such as climate change are perceived. Alberta is a province that is strongly reliant on the oil and gas industry. Oil and gas extraction, along with mining and quarrying, has had the largest increase in employment in Alberta. According to the Government of Alberta, as of October 2024, the amount of people employed in these sectors has increased by 13.4%. The province of New Brunswick also has a strong reliance on the oil and gas industry for employment and for the impacts that it has on the economy, with the Irving Oil Refinery in St. John being the largest oil refinery in Canada. Despite this, New Brunswick has managed to integrate climate change and other environmental issues into its school curriculums in a way that is educating children and youth on climate change. The oil and gas industry in Alberta is both the largest industry in the province and the biggest contributor to climate change. In 2022, Alberta's greenhouse gas emissions amounted to 269.9 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Alberta's greenhouse gas emissions per capita is more than 3 times the average of the rest of Canada at 59.8 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, with the national average being 18.2 tons. The oil and gas industry in Alberta produced 158.3 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalents in 2022. The oil and gas industry has contributed to the devastation of forests, loss of wildlife, pollution, and to the dispersing of toxic metals and other chemicals that have a negative impact on physical health. The impact that the oil and gas industry in Alberta has provincially, nationally, and internationally cannot be overstated. Acknowledging the reliance that Alberta has on the oil and gas industry, while also highlighting its environmental impact, is essential to creating a solution to address climate change and to educate children and youth on climate change. In Alberta, climate change is indeed proving to be a serious and worsening issue, with forest fires being an example. In 2023, over 2 million hectares of forest were burned as a result of forest fires. In the 6th assessment report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it is shown that carbon dioxide emissions have contributed to the Earth's rising temperatures. Efforts to lower emissions from fossil fuels and industrial operations have not resulted in a significant reduction in emissions, as well as the level of carbon dioxide emissions being still too high. One question that arises from this as I continue my education in Alberta is, how is Alberta educating children and youth about climate change or other issues that impact the environment? Children and youth in Alberta currently receive little education on climate change. According to a journal article by Greg Lowe and Trudeau in 2022 titled Climate Change Curricula in Alberta, Canada, an Intersectional Framing Analysis, the education that children and youth receive about climate change and other environmental issues does not paint the full picture of climate change as a serious and worsening issue affecting many people with many different lived experiences. Having an educational background in human rights, I feel that it is important to highlight the education of children and youth on issues such as climate change from a human rights perspective. Environmental justice is an important part of environmental education, as it identifies the impact that environmental issues such as climate change has on the Earth, while also highlighting the important social justice issues, such as discrimination, systemic racism, workers' rights, the impact of colonization on Indigenous peoples, and many other social justice issues. An important element to consider when looking at environmental justice from a Canadian, or more specifically Albertan context, is decolonization. Colonization has contributed and continues to contribute to the destruction of the environment through the cultural genocide of Indigenous peoples, which included the systematic suppression and erasure of Indigenous cultural traditions of caring for and respecting the environment. The 95 Calls to Action, created by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada in 2015, also addresses environmental justice in calls to action numbers 62 and 63, which call on the federal, provincial, and municipal governments to change school curriculums to provide adequate education to children and youth regarding the history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and the impact that colonization had and continues to have on Indigenous peoples. This would include providing children and youth with quality education on environmental justice, Indigenous ways of knowing and relating to and caring for the land and respecting the environment. It would also include providing Indigenous children and youth with quality education on Indigenous ways of knowing. This would not only uphold the 95 Calls to Action, but would also uphold the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which is also known as UNDRIP, which says that states must make sure that Indigenous peoples can engage in traditional cultural practices and ways of knowing, and ensure that they can pass on this knowledge to Indigenous children and youth. This includes education on environmental justice and Indigenous practices of caring for the environment. Environmental justice is a vital part of truth and reconciliation and of decolonization, and the adequate education of children and youth is part of the process. With Alberta's school curricula lacking in climate change education, what action is being taken to advocate for children and youth to receive quality education on climate change, among other environmental issues? The Alberta Council for Environmental Education, or the ABCEE, is an organization in Alberta that aims to improve the education that children and youth receive on the environment, including climate change. In my research of this organization, I have gained valuable knowledge of the different initiatives that the Alberta Council for Environmental Education has undertaken to support children and youth in their education on climate change and other environmental issues. As part of its strategic plan for 2023 to 2026, the Alberta Council for Environmental Education has 5 goals to achieve its objective of improving environmental education for children and youth. The goals are to drive excellence and deepen impact, support and engage K-12 teachers and environmental educators, to support and empower Alberta youth, champion environmental education through advocacy, communication, and outreach, and to sustain a thriving organization. Through these goals, the Alberta Council for Environmental Education hopes to improve environmental education, as well as to improve equity and sustainability in Alberta. The Alberta Council for Environmental Education has programs that aim to address the lack of environmental education for children and youth in Alberta. The first program is the Alberta Youth Leaders for Environmental Education program, also known as ALEE. This program helps youth in grades 7 to 12 to learn about environmental issues and to engage in climate action both in their schools and throughout Alberta. Eco Schools in Alberta is another program run by the Alberta Council for Environmental Education. In collaboration with Eco Schools Canada, this program gives schools in Alberta information about environmental issues such as climate change to improve school curriculums so that children and youth can receive quality education on climate change and other environmental issues. Finally, Green Careers for Youth is a program for youth in grades 9 to 12 that allows them to connect with professionals working in jobs that are related to the environment and environmental issues. These professionals help to guide youth in choosing careers that are related to the environment and provides job opportunities for students in the environmental sector. Through these programs, the Alberta Council for Environmental Education is creating change and promoting climate change action by supporting children and youth in learning about and engaging in the environment so that they can also be agents of change to promote sustainability in Alberta. The education of children and youth on climate change and other environmental issues, as well as on environmental justice, provides children and youth with the ability to learn about how to properly care for and respect the environment. As climate change continues to be a serious issue in Alberta and around the world, it is more important than ever to give children and youth the chance to live in a clean, safe, and flourishing environment where they can grow and learn. To give them that chance, we have to teach children and youth about issues like climate change so that they can preserve the environment for future generations. By not teaching children and youth about climate change in Alberta, we are robbing future generations of the chance to live a life that many of us have taken for granted. Social workers also have a role in ensuring that children and youth receive quality education on climate change and other environmental issues in Alberta. Social workers can advocate alongside children and youth through participating in social justice movements that aim to improve environmental education for children and youth, as well as to join organizations such as the Alberta Council for Environmental Education. Social workers can also advocate for policy changes at the provincial level to ensure that issues such as climate change are included in Albertan school curriculums. Social workers have a responsibility to protect and promote the human rights of all people, including children and youth, which includes their right to education. Article 29 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child states that children and youth must be educated on the development of respect for the natural environment, which includes the right to be educated on environmental issues like climate change. The Convention on the Rights of the Child also places an obligation on Canada, and by extension, Alberta, to respect and promote this right. I would like to see a world where my children can live without the looming threat of climate change, and create happy memories of playing in a healthy, safe environment like I did as a child. And that starts with education.
Thank you for listening to the Climate Action and Advocacy on the Airwaves. We hope you enjoyed your time here. This project was undertaken with the financial support of the University of Calgary's Mobilizing Alberta Climate Action Grant Program. We are broadcasting on 90.9 FM CJSW in Calgary. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the airwaves soon.